Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another Open Door session. It's great to have you here. Open Door from Property CEO, as if you didn't guess, because it's on the screens behind us. My name's Richie Clapson, and I'm here with the other half, some say the better half, I tend to disagree, of Property CEO, Mr. Ian Child.
Good evening, everyone. Hope you're all very well.
Look, it's great to have you here. And just in case this is your first time, and I'm sure for a few of you it is, what have you let yourself in for on this fine Thursday evening? Well, our aim, as always, is to give you 45 minutes of non-stop positivity, all based around the theme of business and property development. Isn't that right, Ian?
It certainly is, Richie. Basically, Richie and I run a company called propertyCEO, and our job is to train people how to become successful small-scale property developers. Lots of amazing opportunities out there at the moment, particularly for new developers. So we wanted to help people find out more about what's going on and to see if development might be a good fit for them.
That's right. Of course, you know, global pandemic, mind you, yesterday, vaccines coming out next week, so that can't be bad. That's a bit of light at the end of the tunnel. I don't know if anyone saw, but the share prices for major house builders went up 30%. So that's encouraging for any new developers out there. So now is really a great time. And of course, a recession is a great time for people to take advantage of the opportunities, but of course, only for those that seek them out rather than waiting for everything to settle down. As always, we'll be giving a few predictions, guests. We have a guest this evening, and probably that's why you're all here. Training, and above all, we're going to have a bit of fun doing it. As always, it's questions in the chat box. No questions, no show, because we're just going to be sat looking at each other. So please pop your questions in the chat box and we will get started very shortly. So let's just see who's on this evening. Well, literally, Phil's just signed on. James is on, Stuart's on, Joe's on, India's on, Yvonne's on, Raj is on, Jacqueline's on, Sumi, Marilise, Keith, Pardeep, Tony, George, Colin, Giovanni, Jackie, Paul, Karen, Sarah, Martin, Keith, Mr. Wonderful, hang on. Mr. Wonderful is actually Simon. Simon, you're not Mr. Wonderful, so I don't know why you've logged on as that. And Ranjit's on from Property Investor News.
Not Property Investor News.
No, have you ever heard of it, Ian? Property Investor News?
Don't think we mentioned it before.
No, wouldn't mention it again either. But Ranjit from Property Investor News is on. It was his birthday last week, so yeah, happy birthday for last week. Jennifer's just signed on. Jennifer, good evening. And Yvonne says good evening in the chat box. Pardeep says good evening, gents. That's slightly better, isn't it? And of course, Ranjit's putting good evening, Richie, Ian, and Colin. So Colin, who's Colin? Well, Colin Smith, you all know because you've had the email. Colin Smith from CGS Planning is coming on this evening as our guest. So please get your questions in. Any questions on planning, we will see if Colin can answer them. So quick, give us a hands up, please, if you can see and hear us okay. Give us a sea of hands. Sea of hands. Yes. Oh, they were slightly delayed. I didn't think you could hear us for a minute. Excellent. I'm going to drop the hands and then we'll bring Colin on. I'm going to just get you to raise your hands when we can see Colin. So Colin, are you with us this evening? Are you there?
Yes, good evening.
Excellent. Just pop your camera on for me, Colin.
Yeah.
Hey, there is.
Yeah, look at that.
Good evening, Colin.
In all my glory.
Yeah. But that's Colin Smith from CGS Planning in all his glory. Can you give us a quick hands up if you can see and hear Colin, please, just to make sure we've got that working absolutely fine. Excellent, excellent. And I should drop all the hands and give me a sea of hands if you want us to dismiss Colin straight away. Oh, one or two hands went up and then quickly went down. Colin, welcome back to the show. It's been a few months since you've been on. I always appreciate you coming on. We always get a good attendee list when you're around. So they must like you. They must love you.
That's I don't know why. Well, I think it's about 2 months ago when I was last here rambling on about something or another.
Yeah.
But, but thank you very much for having me back.
You did ramble on. I mean, Ian and I chatted around that after the last one, and we said he did half ramble on that, Colin Smith. But I guess that's what people like.
So I just come back this time to apologise.
Well, look, before we start getting some questions in, so guys, please throw your questions in ready for Colin. Colin, do you want to give us a quick update on what's going on in the planning world? Maybe just a quick 5 minutes.
Yeah, well, to say it's been a year of change was certainly the last sort of 3 months or so. There's been massive changes, as most of you probably know. 1st of September, it all kicked off, whereby we've got airspace extensions now. They were being muted for quite a long time, and now we're able to go upwards now in airspace extensions, and just about anything with a roof, you can actually put another 2 roofs on top. That's you know, we've talked about that in the past, I think, and if anybody's got any questions about that sort of stuff, then obviously we'll do the Q&A. The other biggie was that we've had the amalgamation of our high street uses, so shops, professional services, restaurants, doctors' surgeries, and gyms and offices. They've all been amalgamated now into this new super class, as I call it, Class E. And that has given us a massive opportunity. Those of you that know me know that I love permitted development, and already I've seen lots of loopholes regarding taking small shops and then converting the uppers, whereby before this use class change, that wasn't available. So I can talk about that a little bit later on. There's the development white paper. White paper means that it's important. It's going through the Parliament at the moment. They're discussing it. They're going to be streamlining the planning services. Not a moment too soon. The planning system, in my humble opinion, is broken, so they're hoping to fix it for my benefit. We're going to be putting in new zoning. We're going to be improving housing delivery, and you know, lots and lots of good stuff, hopefully, if it gets put forward. And of course, we've had this thing called COVID, and that has massively changed our social habits. It's changed the way that we work, even, and even how we shop. And that in itself is bringing forward a lot of great opportunities. It's not just about changing commercial uses to resi. It's about repurposing existing commercial uses. You know, the big blue chip companies now are now looking at ways of having pods. I think Richie mentioned it the other day. I totally agree with that. And the great thing about repurposing is that you don't need planning permission. Not great for me, but it's great for you guys as developers. And of course, we've had the terrible news. We've had Debenhams is now gone. Arcadia is either gone or on the way out. I think there are over 8 major brands with Arcadia. And one thing that we tend to forget is that where there's a big store, the little stores usually congregate around it. So if a large store goes to the wall, unfortunately, that's going to impact on lots of smaller shops around it. But again, there's winners and losers in this game. And if you know where to look, that's, again, yet another opportunity. I would say that we've probably had 10 years of change in the last 10 months, quite honestly. So, you know, big things are changing. And apart from all of that, there's now been significant moves on the planning front regarding changing agricultural buildings, not to residential, but to commercial uses. And I did talk about this before, but as I said, our spending and social habits are now changing. We were thinking that maybe we're going to be spending more time at home, working from home, but I think it's more going to be having your own enclosed environment where you can be working in a safe environment, if you like, in a smaller, more family type of environment. But you can also shop and eat and drink and go to the cafe and things like that at the same time. And one of the underused permitted development classes actually takes agricultural buildings and allows you to do that. And I've seen quite a lot of interest in people thinking ahead, making up small nursery commercial units, dividing up your commercial buildings, your agricultural buildings, and you know, making them much more how can I say, flexible. Yeah. And lastly but not leastly, one of the big changes, and this is going to affect everybody, and that is we've now got the technical space standards. Now this has come about because some scallywag developers last year have been developing stuff whereby flats without windows, we've had flats that you couldn't swing a toddler in, and all in all, it's you know, it's not good. But unfortunately, well, in my opinion, again, the government have slightly over-egged the custard there, in that we're now having these minimum space standards, and this is going to kick off on the 6th of April. Okay, so if you're thinking about doing any form of permitted development or even planning permission, then you really got to get your skates on, because those standards will kick in and it will affect your bottom line. Whereas before you could get maybe a couple of nice studios in, say, shops with uppers and so on, but now you're going to be restricted and you might not only get one. That's going to affect retail prices, that's going to affect your development costs and so on, and ultimately it's going to affect your bottom line. So, you know, space standards, 6th of April, if you don't know about it, then let's make it at least one of the topics for discussion tonight, because it's very, very important. That's my news roundup for now.
Brilliant, Colin, that's great. Can I just say for everyone that's listening this evening out there, here at Property CEO, we do not condone swinging toddlers, which is what Colin suggested.
Cats are okay,
do not swing toddlers. Even cats, I know people talk about that, but I'm sure there's some cat lovers out there. If you have to do one or the other, do the cats rather than the toddlers.
Rightio.
Excellent.
Right.
So
we start with some questions.
Yeah, let's. I've got one in here from Mike. Mike says, "Hi Colin, I have read something about now having to provide adequate natural light in all rooms. How will this be judged? And is this for all rooms, bedrooms, bathrooms, etc.?" What do you think?
Okay, very good question, Mike. This came in a little while ago. Again, it's a good thing. It stops the developers putting in flats without any windows, effectively. But the building regulations help us here. For ventilation purposes, your openable window area for a habitable room needs to be 1/20th of the floor area. That is a building regulation stipulation, okay? Now, it could be argued that that should be good enough to satisfy natural light, okay? But there is something called the 25-degree rule and the 45-degree rule, okay? Now, if you want to make a note of this, it's BRE Digest. BRE stands for Building Research Establishment. It's their Digest 209. You can Google it, and it will explain what the 25-degree rule and the 45-degree rule is. And it's just basically, it's common sense. If you show on your plans, because now you need to have detailed plans in all cases, then you will show these little diagonal lines where your windows are, just to demonstrate that there's no obstructions, and that will ensure that you've got adequate natural light. But that is a good question. What is a habitable room? Basically, somewhere where you sleep and where you live, as in a living room, and where you eat. That is essentially a habitable room. So things like kitchens, bathrooms, utilities, that sort of thing are not habitable rooms. But it's always a good idea to have windows in those anyway, really, because they steam up otherwise. But yeah, that's it. Thank you, Mike.
Fantastic, Mike. I hope that answers your question. Richie.
Okay. Tony's question in. So Tony's got a question here. Hi, Colin. We are considering buying a 4-bed detached house and splitting it into two 2-bed house and 2 1-bed flats. So into a 2-bed house and 2 1-bed flats. As a relative newbie to property investment, we're not sure where to start with planning requirements and the best way to finance the deal. Well, let's just talk about planning. Any suggestions would be grateful. If you want to talk, Tony, about financing the deal, by all means, email us in here and we can help on that separately. But in terms of this, so splitting a 4-bed detached house into a 2-bed house and 2 flats, where does one start with planning, Colin?
Well, the thing is with questions like this, they're very site specific. Okay, yep. So therefore it's very much down to your local authority, your planning authority, and what their local rules are, which govern that sort of work, that sort of development. So off the top of my head, first of all, important things are parking. Do you have enough parking spaces to service the new accommodation? As a general rule of thumb, you need 1 parking space for every bedroom that you have, usually up to a maximum of 3 spaces. Okay, just to give you an idea. So if you've got a 4-bedroom house, chances are you probably only need 3 spaces. But again, it is very much location specific. Next thing you've got to think about is garden space. Local authorities usually, generally 90% of the time, have what they call amenity standards. So the amount of area that you have allocated for your garden is very, very important. The next most important thing I would say is that most local authorities like to preserve family housing. So if you're doing something which in effect removes a family house, i.e. take a house, convert it into flats, that might not be a good idea as far as the council's concerned, because you're taking away family housing. So the trick there is one of the flats should be at least 3 bedrooms. And if you can do that, bearing in mind space standards that we talked about, then you can get over that particular objection, okay? Other things they'll be worrying about is car parking, as I say, cycle racks, probably. The closer you are to bus services and trains and things like that, the more sustainable you are. It's how well you connect with services. So if you're in town, for example, the need for parking isn't so great, but if you're in the countryside, then the need's much greater. And refuse collection, okay? Where are you going to put all your bins, things like that? Off the top of my head, they're the sort of things you want to look at. And then from a technical point of view, you want to consider whether you're in a conservation area. Conservation area is all about the character impact. So if you're thinking of some sort of architectural folly in a terrace house, then think again. And you might want to think about flood risk as well. If you're thinking about flats, it's not a good idea to have flats in a flood zone for obvious reasons. So all those little things to think about, but that sort of question is very much site specific and local authority specific. Now I'm going to give you a golden nugget here of how planning consultants do this, okay? What you do, you go on the local authorities planning portal, their search page, and you simply pop in the postcode of where you are and look for anything similar that people have done previously. You then look at the planning officer's assessment, okay? And from there, will give you a very good guide as to what they're looking for and what they're not looking for, more importantly, okay? So go on the council website, see what the planning officer says about a similar development, and that'll give you a very good heads up. That probably saved you a lot of money rather than talking to people like me.
There you go, Tony, and we will give Colin's details out at the end of the show, so by all means you are welcome to contact him if you want a bit more information. But that's some good golden nuggets there. Well done, Colin. What have we got next to him? Let's keep him going.
We've got one in from Phil. Phil asks, would you recommend specialising in just Class Q? It seems like a lesser used PD, right? And I guess maybe linked to that is your little tease earlier on, Colin, about agricultural to commercial. Perhaps you could just maybe fill us in a little on that as well.
Sure. Now, as you guys may or may not know, I actually teach this stuff. I do planning workshops and so on. That isn't a plug, but what I am leading up to say is I can literally talk for hours all about agricultural buildings, because that's one that's one of my specialisms. Now you've got 2 ways of doing this. You've got Class Q, which is changing agricultural buildings to residential, and you've got the underused class, which is called Class R. And Class R allows you to take an agricultural building and turn it into a mixed use, and you can change it from anything from a shop to professional services, even a restaurant, storage, you name it. Practically you can do it. You can even change it to a hotel if you want to, and it's a mixed use. So Class R is very exciting if you're a planning consultant. We love Class R. And Class Q, there was and maybe still be an opportunity with Class Q. And that is that about 3 years ago, roughly, I can't remember exactly, I think it was 3 years ago, the rules were changed. And a lot of barn conversions under permitted development rights Class Q were refused. But this change that happened about 3 years ago was overlooked. And now it is actually possible to look at refusals and fix them. So there could be some farmers out there who are a bit fed up with their barn languishing unused, when in actual fact you can knock on their door and say, look, do you fancy JVing with me? I know how to fix it. And, you know, gives you the opportunity to pick up a barn cheap maybe. But that is an opportunity. So going back to the original question, is Class Q underused? Yes, it probably is. Is it an opportunity? Most certainly. And it's like everything. If you get good at just specialising in a particular area, then you'll become the go-to person, you know, whether you're deal sourcing or whatever it is, you know. Don't spread your knowledge too far, otherwise it's too thin. Just start to specialise. And Class Q is a really great permitted development right. So, yes, I agree with you.
Fantastic. Great advice, Phil. Hope that helps. Richie.
Yeah, well, we've got another one from Simon. This is you need to prick your ears up to this because this is a long question. These are several questions in one, all to do with Class Q.
Wow.
So, hi, a question for Colin, which is great, really, because you're on the show. So if there's a question for anyone else, that would be pointless. Yeah. Okay. So the question is, I think it's like a multiple choice, really. It says, apply for an agricultural barn change of use to domestic C3. Okay, under GPDO.
That's easy for me to say.
It was easy for me to say. Do you want me to try that again?
You're breaking your teeth in for a camel, aren't you?
I am. They'll be fine. They'll be fine. Okay, so apply for an agricultural barn change of use to domestic C3 under GPDO QA. Don't apply under QB because it is likely to fail, say under question 1. Or submit for reasonable changes under full planning, stay the elevation. So there's 3 statements there. Then it says, what criteria is it judged under? Is it the full range of planning criteria, i.e. green belt, unacceptable development in the countryside, etc., etc., or is it already change of use to C3, and can they say only comment reasonably on the proposed elevational changes? What do you make of all that?
Blimey, where do I start? Okay, well, you remember I said I could talk for hours? Well, you better strap yourself in then. So
give us a quick summary so we don't spend hours on it.
All right, Class Q has 2 parts to it. It's got QA and QB. QA allows for a change of use only, and QB allows for a change of use and all of the necessary building work to convert. Now, I've had quite a lot of success on this, and quite high level success, whereby some of my appeals, which I've been successful on, have actually been used as test cases. So I feel like I am an authority to talk on this. I'm not being big-headed, it's just what happened. So what we've done in the past, we've taken something which is not much more than a chicken shed made out of crinkly tin and wire, and we have said that it is an agricultural building because it is. It held chickens. It was obviously not able to be converted to residential. So we went for QA only, the change of use only. The local authority absolutely hated it, tried to stop it. It went to appeal, but we won because we're just applying the rules. And we then went for a subsequent planning application for the building works only. And that is vital, okay? You're not asking for a change of use because you'll get refused. It's only for the building work. They call it a shell application, all right? So your change of use is established by PD rights, Class Q, and then the building works are then tacked on with a separate, totally independent shell application. This obviously opens up a lot of opportunities because anything that you can see which you wouldn't ordinarily think you could convert, well, now you can fix it, which goes back to my earlier point about looking at your local authority's search page and look for agricultural buildings that have been refused. That is one of the ways that you can now fix it. So what did the local authority look for? Number one thing that they look for is that the building must not be abandoned. Although the use doesn't have to be in current use, it could have finished 30 years ago. It had to have been, there's a date stamp on it, it had to be in use on this date stamp or before, but it doesn't have to be in current use. However, if it's been abandoned, it cannot be reused. So it mustn't be abandoned, all right? So if you've got a really shabby looking barn, clean it up a little bit first, take all the ivy off of it, park a few sheep in there for the inspector to go and have a look at, okay? That's what you should do. The other things that they look for are flood zone, they look for traffic. It mustn't be in a conservation area, all right? that will kick it out straight away, and it can't be a listed building. Well, it wouldn't be listed, would it? But it can't be in a conservation area. Contamination, noise and disturbance and things like that are also considerations. But the main thing is, was it in agricultural use? I can't remember the date off the top of my head. I really ought to, but I can't. 2013 sometime, I think it was May the 20th, 2013 rings a bell. So it has to be in use on that date or prior, okay? It mustn't be abandoned. It mustn't be in a conservation area. They're your key things. And be mindful of flood risk as well, all right? But apart from that, you're good to go. Hopefully that answered the question.
Simon, hopefully that was good. Mike, earlier when we talked about natural light, says thanks for the answer. Terrific. And Tony says many thanks. Tony was the one who was looking to convert the 4-bed house into a 2-bed house and some flats. Ian, what's the next question for Colin?
Well, I was a little intrigued when in your little roundup at the start there, Colin, you mentioned about retail uppers. I wonder, could you expand on that a little?
Yeah, this is going to be slightly curtailed after the 6th of April because the technical space standards kick in. There's lots of standards for sizes of bedrooms, how many people can occupy a bedroom, and so on and so forth. For developers, the lower end is that you can't build anything now less than 37 square meters. Now, that's quite big. If you think that a 1960s, 1970s bungalow was about 650 square feet, which is 65 square meters, that means you can't now get 2 of the brand new modern studios in that space, just to give you an idea of proportion, if you like. So if you're going to get on this particular bandwagon, make sure you get your applications in before the 6th of April. Now, having said that, there are 2 ways that you can now convert shops and get residential out of it. The first way is something called Class M, and that allows you to convert up to 150 square meters of ground floor space, okay, but not in a conservation area and flood risk, as we said before, and that sort of stuff. In high street situations, you've got to keep a small proportion of the front of the shop as trading as a shop, because you can imagine walking down your high street, you can't have shop, 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 thatched cottage, shop, shop, shop. It doesn't work. You've got to keep your shops going, okay? So that's one thing. Again, you've got to think about your natural light and that sort of thing. So wherever you've got a terrace of shops, you've got to make sure you can get enough light in there for the new residential use. The second way that you do it is you've got something called Class G. Now, Class G enables you to take a retail unit or a professional services and also bookmakers, bizarrely, and you can put 2 flats for every one of those units. Now, the sneaky thing is here, I don't advocate you do it in a listed building, but the sneaky thing is here that you don't need planning permission to subdivide a shop. And yet the rules say for every shop you can have 2 flats. So if you had a shop, you could subdivide it into 2 shops. How many flats do you now have? 4, okay? And the bit they don't always remember is that in some of these older buildings, you have quite high ridge heights in the roof space in the attic, okay? Now, the use is the building, it's the whole thing. So therefore, you've got scope now to do something in the attic space as well. You may drop the ceiling upstairs or whatever you need to do. But just when you look at a particular opportunity and you think it's a shop, it's only 1 flat, it might not work. Well, first of all, it's a shop that you might be able to change to a ground floor resi. It's a shop that you could have 2 resi units above. And if you can subdivide that shop, you've got 2 resi units for each shop that you've created. So that is a good example of an opportunity that most people miss simply because they don't understand the rules. So hopefully that's really, really quick explanation, by the way. So
brilliant. No, thank you very much. Fantastic.
You're welcome.
Excellent. So just out of interest, Mary-Lise is on the scene. Hello, Mary-Lise. Nice to see you again. And she says, this is just a statement. She said, I started on my Part Q into new build on site yesterday. Deepest joy. I think that sounds slightly sarcastic. But anyway, Let's go back. Raj has got a question in here. Raj had two questions. Raj, you are allowed two questions. There's no problem. He said, am I allowed to? But I think the second one's been answered, Raj, on the shops and offers, hopefully. So his first question is, hello, A-team and Colin. You've probably heard that statement before. But I think we can accept you as part of the A-team now. He says, I have a semi-detached property with space belonging to the semi-detached property on the side to build another unit. Would you need planning permission?
What do you mean, an extension, or do you mean another house?
I think Raj means another house.
You need, yeah, if you're going to create, unless it's PD, you always need specific express permission to create a dwelling unit, definitely. If it's an extension, you can put a single story extension on the side, but not in a conservation area.
Okay. Raj, there you go. I'm sure that's what you're asking, but you've had both choices there. Ian, what's next?
We've got one from Harjinder, who asks, can you still convert a pub into residential under PD rights?
This is another one which I could talk for hours. With pubs are protected. And since we had the new changes of use in September, they are now further doubly wrapped in bubble wrap to keep them safe. They always were the hub of the community, now even more so, even though the government wants to shut everyone down right now, which is a shame. That's another topic. When can you convert a pub? When is a pub not a pub? This is what I always say to my workshop guys, and that is when it's a restaurant. Okay, not all pubs are pubs. If a fair proportion of what their business is to eat, okay, think Wetherspoons, for example. Can you go into Wetherspoons and buy yourself a slice of cake and not have any alcohol at all? Yes, you can. So therefore, it is more like a restaurant than a pub. I'm sure that Wetherspoons might disagree with that, but the definition is that. Now, when it's a restaurant, that's class A3. Now, class A3 can transmute to A1 or A2, and with that happening, you now get this class G, whereby you can then convert the uppers. Most pubs are protected, like I say. Most drinking establishments, well, all drinking establishments are protected. So one little trick is to actually keep a small part of it, maybe as a cocktail bar, something like that, and then convert the remainder. So as long as it's the business use is still retained in some form or another, that's usually okay. Now, because pubs are protected, you think you can just go ahead and do it, you know, with a proper planning application or a strategy. But the thing is that you have to demonstrate that the community no longer wants the pub, all right? And you do that with it needs to be marketed with a estate agent for at least 12 months. And ideally, there should have been 3 successive price drops during that 12 months to demonstrate that basically that, you know, it's no longer wanted. And even then the fun hasn't stopped, because you then have to demonstrate that you can't use your pub for alternative uses. So a quick fast track way around all of that is simply to retain a part of it as a pub, restaurant, and so on, and then convert the rest of it. So when can you convert a pub? When it's a restaurant, basically.
Fantastic. Harjinder, I hope that helps. Thank you very much, Colin.
Okay.
So Martin's question, Colin. Martin says, hi, Colin. I believe if we have a block of flats, okay, we can extend and add floors on top, but it has to be empty for 6 months before we apply to planning. He says, can we have agreements with the tenants that they are vacating prior to construction, maybe on some short lets or ASTs, or do they have to be empty for 6 months prior? Cheers, Martin.
This is one of those grey areas. Because of the legislation is basically brand new, this hasn't been tested yet. It's my understanding that the flats need to be vacated. Yeah, they do. Yep. And it's a bit strange, because where you've got a block and it's in a mixed use, so you've got a commercial use on the ground floor and you've got flats above, those flats don't have to be vacated. So why the difference? And that's why there's a grey area. So I can't give you a straight answer on that one. I think the jury's out right now. It's down to the interpretation of what that means effectively. You know, do the leases have to expire? Or is it simply literally that they are no longer occupying the building? You know,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I can't answer that. I'm afraid I don't know.
Okay, Mark, a little bit of a grey area. Maybe if you contact Colin separately, he can maybe have a look at a little bit more on that for you at a later date.
Look at the rule book.
Yeah, good stuff. Ian.
One here from Helen, who asks, what will happen next year when the old planning use classes end? Will we still be able to convert offices into residential?
Oh, that's a good one as well. Right. So right now there's something which is called a transitional period, and that is running from basically September just now to the 31st of July next year. And during that period, you actually have the choice of which regime of permitted development you want to use. So it's fairly interchangeable. That's another opportunity, incidentally. Now, what happens after this transitional period, what happens after July, it's a bit of the Wild West, really. We don't really know. We think, an educated guess is there's going to be maybe just 2 permitted development rights. And it will probably be a hybrid of office conversions, but include the new Class E. So we'll be able to say Class E, if you remember Class E has amalgamated most of the high street uses, we'll now be able to use Class E and effectively change that to residential. No doubt there will be other restrictions like time stamps and so on. But the clever money is that's what we think is going to happen. But the government keeps surprising us. For instance, they've introduced space standards just now. We weren't expecting that so quickly, and so on. But yeah, so that's what I think will happen. The one permitted development right that will not change, and that is your agricultural ones, because an agricultural use is a use all on its own. So that hasn't changed, so therefore it won't change. So like I say, we think that Class O will be adapted, the office to resi will become like a super permitted development right, and we'll be able to do lots of stuff like that. Yeah, the government's overall aim is to make things as flexible as it possibly can. For example, with the airspace extensions, there's now 7 different ways in which you can do that. So irrespective of what sort of property you have, there's probably a PD right that will suit you. And I think they're going to do that with a Class O, but change it to something else. Call it Class Z something probably, but who knows.
Fantastic. Brilliant.
There you go, Helen. You heard it here first. Raj's question earlier about the site on the side. He says, Colin and A-team, thank you. Okay, Pardeep's got a question. Evening, Pardeep. Good to see you on the show here. He says, hi, Colin. When is the new zoning system, regeneration protected, etc., coming into place?
It's not. It's going through. I don't know what the correct word is. Ascension, is it? It's going through Parliament. It's a white paper, which means it's pretty important. When they talk about green papers, that means they're not very important, but a white paper apparently is. And it's being looked at right now. I've got a sneaky suspicion. We talked about this transition period just now. I think it's all going to kick off then in July, at the end of July. That's what I think is going to happen. The Town and Country Planning Act first started 1948, 72 years ago. It's been revised virtually every year since. The last big rewrite was 1990. I think 2021 will be the next big rewrite, to be honest with you. I think that's what's going to happen.
Okay, Party, there you go. There you go. Ian, do you want to go for one? Assuming a few more before we wrap up.
I've got one here from Adam. Quite an interesting question about Class ZA. So he's seen under the new Class ZA about demolishing and building new residential that the planners can assess you on external appearance of the new building and the impact on businesses in the area. What do these mean?
They're in, well, basically it's a character assessment to make sure that what you're looking to do isn't too outlandish, which is a bit mad when you consider that you can, you know, add an extra 2 stories onto something. You've got up to, I think it's 1,000 square meters, 1,000 square meters, I said, didn't say that wrong, on the ground floor, and you can then multiply that up to 4 times. So quite how you do a character assessment on the elevations on that, I've got no idea. Again, this is one of those ones that's all uncharted territory. It's brand new, and I don't even know of one that's gone through planning yet. Maybe some of my colleagues might be listening and advise me of one, but I've not seen one actually go through just yet. And then impact on businesses, well, you know, that's the same old thing of, does it conflict with local policies? Despite the fact that the high street's dying, local policies, which haven't been updated for years, are still trying to preserve those local businesses. So there is an impact there. If you take away, you know, a building that had a lot of commercial uses in it, and then you're going to replace it with a block of flats. Remember what I said about Debenhams going and all the little satellite shops all around it? That there is an impact there, you know. Incidentally, you'll probably see a few Debenhams coming up for sale. Probably.
I'm sure you will. I mean, one question that leads on from that, I guess, is do you think then that these design-related conditions that come with things like Class ZA, is that something that's so subjective that the local planning authorities can actually use it as a means of just avoiding the stuff they don't like, or is it going to be prescriptive?
Yeah, kicking the can down the road, that's what I call it. So the answer is yes. And again, it's a bit of a conflict, because with these new rights, these airspace rights, they allow, for example, means of escape in fire, and therefore rear escape staircases and lift shafts and machinery on the roofs. That's all allowed, but you're not allowed to have any external visible support to the building. Bearing in mind how much weight that you're adding now to add extra stories, and that's a whole conversation in itself. And yet you're then being subjective to, as you say, an opinion as to whether it's in character or not. Planning permission is all about character, really. If we could all build invisible houses, we'd be building all day long. But they always have to be in character. So you're quite right. You know, is it another stick to beat us with? I think what one of the things is, as a point of discussion, is that the reasons that local authorities don't like permitted development is effectively because it takes away their control. And I think this is a way of giving a little bit of control back to the local authority. But we'll have to wait a few months, I think, wait for a few of these to actually go through the machinery and see what comes out the other end, you know. And I'm sure there's going to be lots and lots of appeals over the next few years, you know, to iron out the wrinkles. But we're in our uncharted territory, quite honestly. It's difficult to answer those things.
No, for sure. Well, Adam, hopefully, a great question. Hope that that answers it. Have we got one more, Richie?
Yeah, let's just fit one last in from Jin. Jin says, this is a nice simple one. Well, you might not think so, but it says, is the 56-day rule for PD still in place for all PD rights or just some?
It's all for the older ones. So all of your airspace ones, okay, no, it's like a normal 8-week determination period, and the planners can say, can we have an extension of time? And they invariably will. But on the old permitted development rights, which is very easy to remember, actually, it's OMG, oh my God, always remember it that way. O for office, M for retail, and G is our uppers bit. Although, to be precise, Class G is not a prior notification. But on the old ones, and including your agricultural, your 56-day right still is in force there, although the local authority can ask for an extension of time. And just a quick aside, I had a very interesting situation a couple of days back. A guy contacted me, an architect contacted me on Facebook about a problem whereby He was going through an office to resi conversion under Class O, and the local authority asked for an extension of time after the 56-day period had expired. So therefore they couldn't, and therefore he got his permission by default. And he gave me a bottle of whiskey for that bit of information, so that was quite good.
Good stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah.
Jin, hopefully that's answered that. Guys, hopefully you enjoyed that. Give us a quick hands up if you thoroughly enjoyed Colin on the show again this evening. Give us a quick hands up. Hands flying up all over the place, Colin, so people have enjoyed it. Colin, thank you for coming on. Do you have some details? We'll put them in the show notes, guys, as always, which will be up on our YouTube channel. But Colin, do you just want to say some contact details if people are interested to engage with you further? And of course, as Colin said, he does do some educational sessions on planning. So if you are interested, I strongly encourage that would be a good thing to think about doing. Colin, what's the contact details for you?
You can get me on Facebook. I'm pretty recognisable, and just look for CJS Planning. All right. And then from there, friend me if you're not already, and then you can message me via Facebook. That's the easiest way to do it, to be honest with you. The hard way is to go email with cjsplanning247@gmail.com.
Okay, there we go. There's some details for Colin, but as I say, Facebook's the best thing. You won't not recognise him. So Colin, thank you very much for coming on the show. Much appreciated, and maybe we'll get you on next year at some point again.
That'd be lovely. Thank you for inviting me, guys. Cheers.
Thanks very much.
Take care.
All the best. Good night.
Wow.
Brilliant. Guys, hopefully you enjoyed that. Hopefully that was a good show. So we're just going to wrap up now. Just give you a couple of bits of information while we wrap up. And please do pop in the chat box if you enjoyed the show as we do. That'd be great. We will try and get Colin Smith back again next year. I can see we've not answered all the questions. Anyone after interested in a little bit of free session with us? If you enjoy spending time with us, and maybe you don't, if you don't, then just turn off now. If you do, then you are more than welcome to spend a half day with us. And we've got a bit of half day training going on. We've got a couple of dates in December, just because we like doing things like that. If you're interested, Saturday the 5th of December, which is this Saturday in the morning if you're free, and Tuesday the 8th of December in the evening. So Saturday is 9:30 to 12:30, and Tuesday the 8th next week, 6 to 9. Totally free. Write this down because I'm not going to put it in the chat box because you're going to be typing other stuff in. So the link you want is propertyceo.co.uk/roadmap. So remember our website, propertyceo.co.uk/roadmap, and you get a chance to choose the Saturday or the Tuesday, and you're more than welcome to come on. We've called it Becoming a Small Scale Developer, the 6-figure roadmap. It's designed really to give people 3 hours of proper education, of understanding what's involved in being development. You're not going to better go away to be a developer from that, so please don't think that. But it's 3 hours with us. What's not to like? So propertyceo.co.uk/roadmap if you want a free half day with us. That's it. Our next show is next week, the 10th of December at 7 o'clock, and that's our last show before Christmas, isn't it, Ian?
We're having a Christmas break, taking some time out, lots of mince pies and turkey. You won't recognise us in the new year, but yeah, it's we're looking forward to that. So we might even have some tinsel. I don't know if we'll have any decorations up, but we'll try and make it as festive as we can.
Great stuff. Good stuff. Well, thank you very much. I see a few comments in the chat box. What's gone in here? Marilee says, awesome session, dudes. He always calls us dudes. I love that. Thank you so much. Chris says, thanks for the session. That was fantastic, gentlemen, says Raj. Phil says, brilliant stuff. Great show, guys, says Martin. Excellent content, Rich. Rich webinar with, Rich webinar. I thought you meant Richie. Excellent content, Richie. I thought that was just for me, not for you, Ian. Excellent content, rich webinar with Colin and the A team. That's Ranjit Singh from Property Investor News. Very informative, says Surinder. Peter says fantastic. Giovanni says great. George and Will both say exactly the same thing. Look forward to seeing you next week. Look forward to seeing you all next week. Have a great evening. Goodbye now.